Welcome back. As the Democratic Party looks to rebound from its loss in 2024, the most frequently asked question has been, who should lead it? But it's worth remembering that most successful movements actually start from the bottom up and not from the top down. When Stacey Abrams first ran for governor of Georgia in 2018, she received 48.8% of the vote, higher than any Democrat in decades. And she did so by reaching out to infrequent voters, driving up voter registration in underrepresented neighborhoods and knocking on so many doors. She lost, but the operation she built helped turn her state purple in 2020 with big wins for Democrats in two key U.S. Senate races. In 2024, however, that same voter outreach operation struggled. Donald Trump won the state. Now Democrats in Georgia need to regroup as both the governor's mansion and one of the Georgia's U.S. Senate seats are up for grabs in 2026. So joining me now, Stacey Abrams. She's a two-time candidate for governor of Georgia. She's the host of the podcast Assembly Required and a New York Times bestselling author of Our Time Is Now. It is great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk a bit about Georgia and what's going on specifically in Georgia politics. The governor, Brian Kemp, signed a bill this week that outlined the Georgia General Assembly's subpoena powers. The Georgia Senate opened an investigation into you this year, alleging that a group you worked with improperly received government grants. You are on one way, in some way, part of this group of people who are being targeted for their politics. What do you make of this?
I make of it that they are failing at their promises and they're looking at those of us who've managed to deliver for Americans and they're targeting us. I stand accused of helping people register to vote, helping them turn out and vote, helping make certain that families that wanted to lower their energy costs got the equipment and the support they needed. So essentially, they're mad at me for proving that democracy can deliver, and they would rather distract than actually do their jobs. This is an administration that is being supported by a complicit Congress, and they are doing their level best to distract and destroy rather than to actually deliver. And I am one of the people they've targeted. Unfortunately, what that means is that rather than us being engaged in conversations and more importantly, in the work of serving the people, we've got to focus some of our attention on fighting against scurrilous accusations that are grounded in nothing but bad faith and I think fear, because we keep coming pretty close to proving to everyone that their lies cannot stand.
Though we've had a few close movements. Georgia is one of those places where even before the 2024 election, things were happening and courts and electoral boards were doing things that seemed contrary to Democratic interests. We've just watched this play out in North Carolina with the Supreme Court. There's still a lot of activity, generally speaking, on the part of the Republican Party that's not involved in talking to voters about the things that matter to them, including whether it's inflation or voting rights, but about fiddling with the system.
Well, there are two ways to an election. You can either win on the merits or you can win by manipulating the system and by removing undesirable voters. And in the case of North Carolina, by arguing that the voters who followed the rules should not be counted. And the reality for all of us has to be that democracy has to deliver. It cannot simply be an abstract concept. It's got to be a lived experience. I'm as concerned about the 90 million people who didn't show up in the last election as I am about anyone, because they didn't think that their needs were being served by anyone. And if we want to protect our democracy from the rise of tyranny, from a Republican Party that has to own what is happening wholesale, then we've got to start showing people again why democracy exists. It's not about casting a ballot. It's about what that ballot should get you from the people that you hire.
You bring up an important point, that more people don't vote than vote for either presidential candidate in this country, even in an election where lots of people show up. And now, what we're seeing right now in this moment, post-election, is protest movements sprouting up against this administration and what it's doing across the country. It's a strange situation because these movements have a lot of energy. We're seeing people show up by the tens of thousands, even if there isn't an election. And yet polling indicates that voters, including Democratic voters, are deeply dissatisfied with their own situation. In fact, a new AP NORC poll shows that just 35% of Democrats are optimistic about the future of their party. Talk to me about this disconnect between people being dissatisfied with their party, being dissatisfied with the other party, being dissatisfied with the president, being dissatisfied with the way things are going, being dissatisfied with the economy, and yet we see numbers like this.
So I had the privilege of serving as the minority leader, as the standard bearer for my party in the General Assembly. And what I would remind my colleagues of every time is people don't care about your politics. They care about their lives. And so the arguments that we're having are important to the extent that they help us get better at what we do. But we get better at what we do by living our values. I've been spending a lot of time fighting for DEI, for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The reason they are attacking DEI is because it works. It is why service-disabled veterans can come out of our armed forces and start their own small businesses and get a little bit of help. It's why we have access to service providing communities across this country that help those who are distanced from opportunity. We have to start talking about our values and reclaiming those values. That's how you get people to your party. If we make it the reverse, we're going to keep losing the argument. But where I think we stand right now, and I talk about this on my podcast, Simply Required, we had actually Congresswoman Jayapal this week to talk about protests. Previous week, we had your colleague Rachel Maddow on to talk about the importance of protests as a measure of how important this country is. I got to have Senator Cory Booker on. And each of those conversations are about how we actualize the values that we hold. When we're talking about politics and politicians, that's an abstract. When we're talking about what people need and who can help them get it, that's when we start to win. Because you have to win people's values and their hearts before you can win their minds. And when we start to return to that, when we show them that protest leads to problem solving, that's when we start to win again.
Sounds like a platform for somebody who's running for governor.
That sounds like a platform for someone who lives in the United States of America and wants tyranny to be stopped in its tracks. And it's going to take every single one of us. Look, politics is one of the tools that I appreciate. Running for public office is an absolutely good way to put this information out there. But we've got other tools. I've got a podcast. I write books. I do the work of serving the people in community. I'm not putting any tools aside, but I look at the whole toolbox. And in this moment, the tools that we need to be using are the ones that reach people where they are in this moment of fear and deep concern. And in a moment when our democracy is truly under threat from autocrats and tyrants who want to destroy who we are.
So you're not putting tools aside, which means you are considering running for governor.
I am focusing on making certain we get good done. I believe public office is one of the ways to do that. But right now, we all need to be focused like lasers on how do we serve the families that are about to lose Medicaid? How do we serve the children who've had their SNAP benefits stolen from them? How do we stop an omnibus bill that tried to slip in a prohibition against protecting communities against AI going rogue? All of those are issues we have to be talking about now. And that's the focus that I'm going to have because that's the work that needs to be done in this moment.